The miscalculation. Captain Alara Voss stood motionless before the Galactic Conclave, her compact human frame dwarfed by the massive crystalline chamber that housed representatives from over 300 stellar civilizations. Despite her physical stature, there was something in her bearing that commanded attention, a quiet confidence that had become characteristic of human diplomats. Honored members of the Conclave, she began, her voice carrying across the chamber without technological amplification, a skill humans had perfected over millennia of tribal gatherings. The United Earth Alliance respectfully requests that the Noraxian Imperium reconsider their expansion into the Lyra system. Our settlements there are peaceful, productive, and established within boundaries previously agreed upon by this august body. From the elevated platform reserved for dominant military powers, High Marshal Krex of the Noraxian Imperium leaned forward. His massive form, 3 meters of hardened exoskeleton and tensile musculature, shifted with deliberate menace. Bioluminescent patches along his cranial ridge pulsed with colors that translated as derision and contempt. The Lyra system falls within traditional Noraxian expansion zones, Krex rumbled, his translator converting the complex harmonic vocalizations into standard conclave speech. Your colonies, there are unauthorized intrusions into space claimed by our ancestors when your kind still huddled around fires on your primitive world. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Noraxians had dominated this sector for millennia through overwhelming force and biological adaptability. Their warrior culture respected only strength, and humanity, barely 2 centuries into their interstellar period, was viewed as an upstart species playing at galactic politics. Captain Voss's expression remained unchanged, but those familiar with human micro-expressions might have noticed the slight tension at the corners of her eyes. High Marshal, she responded, I must emphasize, please don't make us angry. This is not a threat, merely a sincere request for your own well-being. The chamber erupted in various forms of amusement, vibrational pulses from the silicate life forms, color flashes from the energy beings, and the distinctive clicking mandibles of several insectoid species. The Noraxians were feared across 12 star systems. The idea that humans would warn them struck many as absurdly presumptuous. Your concern for our well-being is noted and dismissed, Krex declared, mandibles clacking in the Noraxian equivalent of laughter. The Imperium does not yield to the whims of infant species. The session concluded with the Conclave voting to maintain neutrality in the dispute, a decision that effectively gave the Noraxians free rein. As representatives filed out through dimensional portals and gravitational tubes, Voss was approached by Delegate Zinta of the ancient Mrarshan Collective, one of the few species who had maintained positive relations with humanity. They do not understand what you tried to do today, Zinta's thought voice projected directly into Voss's mind. Your compassion will be mistaken for weakness. History suggests otherwise, Voss replied quietly. We've tried to be transparent about our defensive capabilities. Perhaps too subtle, the feline-like being suggested. The Noraxians understand only demonstrations of power. Which is precisely what we've been trying to avoid, Voss sighed. Demonstrations have consequences. In the weeks that followed, interstellar communications buzzed with diplomatic activity. Human representatives met privately with conclave members, sharing historical records of previous conflicts. There was the mysterious disappearance of the Xyrillian Combine in 2198, once a formidable raiding force until they targeted human research outposts. The Velkuran Trade Syndicate, which had attempted to establish forced labor camps on human colonial worlds in 2241, vanished from galactic maps within a month. Most species dismissed these accounts as exaggeration or coincidence. The Noraxians certainly did. Aboard the dreadnought Inevitable Conquest, High Marshal Krex reviewed tactical displays showing the approach of his fleet, 300 warships strong toward the human settlements in the Lyra system. Intelligence indicated minimal defenses, a handful of patrol vessels, some orbital platforms, and rudimentary ground installations. High Marshal, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the human command. Display it, Krex ordered, settling his massive form into his command throne. The holographic projection revealed a human male in a simple gray uniform devoid of rank insignia or decorations. His weathered face suggested middle age, though with humans, it was difficult to be certain. Noraxian fleet, this is Captain Darius Wright of Earth Defense Force. You are entering restricted space. We ask once more, please reconsider your actions, don't make us angry. Krex's bioluminescent patches pulsed with amusement. Captain Wright, you have one planetary rotation to evacuate your colonies. Your settlements will be reclaimed, your resources appropriated. This is not negotiation, this is statement of fact. The human's expression remained remarkably calm. Hi Marshal, I'm going to share something with you that we don't advertise widely. Earth is what we call a crucible world, a planet with environmental conditions so challenging that any species evolving there develops unusual adaptations. Everything on our world evolved to compete with everything else. We survived by developing problem-solving skills beyond biological constraints. Empty posturing from a species barely out of its homeworld's gravity well, Krex scoffed. Your time begins now. As the connection closed, Krex's second-in-command, Sub-Marshal Thrix, approached cautiously. Hi Marshal, our intelligence division reports unusual energy signatures from the human settlements. They may possess defensive capabilities not previously documented. Irrelevant, Krex dismissed. Begin attack sequence. The Noraxian fleet advanced in perfect formation. Their ships, evolved from living organisms and enhanced with technology, pulsing with preparatory attack sequences. They expected resistance, perhaps even some novel defensive systems, but nothing that could truly challenge the Imperium's might. What they didn't expect was for reality itself to fragment around them. As the fleet approached weapons range, hidden installations across the human colonies activated. These weren't conventional weapons platforms or shield generators. They were something far more fundamental, spatial manipulators developed in secret over decades of quiet research. On the bridge of the inevitable conquest, alarm signals pulsed from multiple systems. Hi Marshal, the sensor officer called out, voice tinged with unfamiliar fear. We're detecting massive spatial distortions forming throughout the fleet. Krex watched in disbelief as space itself seemed to fold and ripple around his ships. Some vessels stretched impossibly long while others compressed into dense points of matter. Time dilation fields created pockets where crews experienced years in seconds or became frozen in temporal stasis. What sorcery is this? Krex demanded, his confidence evaporating as a squadron of destroyers phased partially out of normal spacetime, their hulls intersecting with multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. It's not sorcery, came Captain Wright's voice over the communications array. It's applied theoretical physics. Every human child learns about quantum superposition and dimensional boundary theory. We just found practical applications. The pride of the Noraxian Imperium, a fleet that had conquered worlds for centuries, found itself helpless against an enemy that didn't fight with conventional weapons, but with the fundamental forces of reality itself. Please stand down, Wright continued, his voice genuinely regretful. We don't want to do this. Through the viewscreen, Krex watched as another battle group entered a probability storm, existing in multiple states simultaneously, intact, destroyed, and every possibility between. A heavy cruiser aged 10,000 years in seconds, its hull crumbling to cosmic dust while the crew remained frozen in temporal suspension. How? Krex demanded, mandibles clicking in distress as his own flagship began experiencing temporal fluctuations. Our intelligence indicated you barely mastered fusion technology. Captain Wright's expression was solemn. We learned long ago that advertising our true capabilities invited conflict. It's easier to appear harmless and ask nicely. You deceived the entire conclave. No, Wright replied. We simply didn't correct your assumptions. Let me tell you about Earth, High Marshal. Our planet has higher gravity than most inhabited worlds. Our weather systems are violent and unpredictable. We evolved alongside predators that could tear apart steel, microorganisms that could rewrite our DNA, and geological events that could wipe out millions in an instant. Every day was a battle for survival. The bridge of the inevitable conquest flickered as temporal waves washed through it. Krex saw his crew aging and de-aging randomly, some trapped in temporal loops, repeating the same actions endlessly. When we discovered dimensional boundary theory, Wright continued, we didn't just theorize about it, we weaponized it. While other species were developing fusion drives and matter-antimatter reactions, we were learning to manipulate probability cascades to bend spacetime to create and destroy causality itself. Why? Krex gasped as his own perception of time began to fragment. Why develop such terrible weapons? Because we're cautious, Wright admitted. Our history is filled with extinction events and world wars. When we reached the stars and found a galaxy filled with powerful empires, we knew we needed protection. But we also knew that power corrupts, so we hid our capabilities and relied on diplomacy. On the tactical display, Krex watched as quantum singularities formed around his dreadnoughts, pulling them into dimensions that shouldn't exist. Energy beings accidentally summoned from parallel realities fed on his ship's power cores. Your Imperium conquers through fear, Wright said. We chose a different path, we ask nicely, we negotiate, we compromise, not because we're weak but because we know what we're capable of. When we say please don't make us angry, we're not threatening, we're pleading. We're begging you not to force us to become the monsters we know we can be. Krex's fleet, once 300 strong, was reduced to less than 50 ships, and those that remained were trapped in quantum probability fields, neither fully in this universe nor completely outside it. We can end this now, Wright offered. Withdraw and we'll stabilize your remaining ships. Continue and there are worse fates than death, High Marshal. There are states of existence that defy comprehension. The science officer turned to Krex, her form flickering between states of matter. High Marshal, their spatial manipulation extends beyond weapons. They could rewrite our genetic code, alter our memories, even change the fundamental constants of our local spacetime. We're not fighting a war, we're facing beings who can reshape reality itself. Krex's mandibles clicked in the Noraxian gesture of surrender. What do you want? We want peace, Wright said simply. We want to explore, make friends, trade ideas. We don't want to rule or conquer, we just want to coexist. As Krex gave the order to retreat, his tactical officer reported something unexpected. High Marshal, they're helping us. They're creating stable spatial corridors to extract our damaged ships safely. Of course they are, Krex muttered. They're not conquerors, they're gardeners, pruning threats before they can grow. The remaining Noraxian ships limped back toward conclave space, carrying with them a tale that would reshape galactic politics forever. The humans, meanwhile, quietly deactivated their spatial manipulators and returned to their colonies, hoping they wouldn't need to use them again. What nobody in the conclave could have anticipated was that this encounter was merely a prelude, a minor skirmish before a storm that would soon threaten all sentient life in the galaxy. And when that storm arrived, it would be the humans, with their terrible, compassionate power, who would stand as the first and perhaps final line of defense, the understanding. The Galactic Conclave Chamber, usually a model of decorum and measured debate, had descended into chaos. Representatives from hundreds of species communicated in a cacophony of sounds, lights, chemical emissions, and telepathic projections. At the center of the storm stood Dr. Nikolai Riznov, chief scientific liaison for the United Earth Alliance, his weathered face betraying none of the tension that must have accompanied being the focus of such galactic scrutiny. Order, the harmonized voice of Grand Arbiter Tiloon resonated through the chamber, their gelatinous form pulsing with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated extreme agitation. We will have order in this assembly. Gradually, the tumult subsided, though waves of communication continued to ripple through the gathered delegates. Dr. Riznov, the Grand Arbiter continued, the conclave demands an explanation for what occurred in the Lyra system. Reports indicate that your species deployed weapons that manipulated the fundamental nature of reality itself. Such technology violates multiple conclave conventions. Riznov adjusted his antiquated spectacles, an affectation that many species found oddly charming, and spoke in measured tones. With respect, Grand Arbiter, humanity deployed defensive systems, not weapons of aggression. The distinction is important. Semantic games, the voice belonged to Delegate Vors of the Tachilian Dominion, a species of silicon-based intelligences housed in mechanized shells. 300 Noraxian warships were subjected to spatial and temporal distortions. 97 of those ships remain unaccounted for, potentially lost in dimensional folds. That is regrettable, Riznov acknowledged, genuine sorrow evident in his voice. We attempted to stabilize all affected vessels. Those that were lost had already initiated self-destruct protocols rather than accept assistance. We mourn the necessity of any defensive action. High Marshal Krex, present via holographic projection from his recovery vessel, raised a massive limb to signal his desire to speak. The chamber fell silent. Few had expected the proud Noraxian commander to attend this session after such a devastating defeat. I have seen what the humans can do, Krex stated, his translator struggling to convey the complex emotional harmonics in his native speech. They did not destroy my fleet when they could have erased us from existence. They chose restraint when overwhelming force was at their disposal. This is not the action of conquerors or tyrants. A murmur passed through the assembly. For a Noraxian, especially one of Krex's standing, to speak favorably of another species was unprecedented. Explain the technology, demanded Representative Elix of the Mechanoid Collective, their voice emitted in perfectly modulated tones. How has humanity achieved manipulation of quantum fields at such scale when your species has been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries? Dr. Riznov moved to the central projection platform where he activated a simple holographic display. Consider our homeworld. He began as a three-dimensional image of Earth rotated before the assembly. What you see is a Class 13 crucible environment, one of only 7 known in the explored galaxy. Earth features extreme biodiversity, volatile weather systems, intense gravitational pressure, high radiation levels, and geological instability. Most sentient species evolved on worlds far more forgiving than ours. Riznov highlighted various regions on the planet's surface. These red zones indicate areas where natural disasters regularly reshape entire landscapes. The blue areas show regions where predatory evolution reached its apex. The Phalian delegate, a being composed of interlinked crystal structures, chimed in with harmonic tones. Many species face evolutionary challenges. This does not explain your capabilities. Perspective is important, Riznov countered. Humans didn't just evolve on a difficult world, we evolved as prey animals who became apex predators through pattern recognition and tool use. Our brains developed not just to react, but to anticipate threats before they manifested. He expanded the display to show human neural architecture. Our unique evolutionary path created minds capable of holding contradictory concepts simultaneously, what we call cognitive dissonance. We can conceptualize both particle and wave, existence and non-existence, linearity and nonlinearity. This is interesting anthropology, the Grand Arbiter noted, but it doesn't address the technology deployed in the Lyra system. But it does, Riznov insisted. Most species develop technology as a linear progression. Fire leads to metallurgy, leads to industry, leads to atomic theory, leads to space travel. Humanity's path was different. Because our minds could hold contradictory concepts, we could make conceptual leaps that bypassed conventional development. He brought up new diagrams showing complex mathematical equations. While we were still developing basic fusion technology for public use, small research teams were already exploring the boundaries between dimensions. When other species were perfecting antimatter containment, we were learning to fold spacetime and manipulate probability cascades. This is troubling, intoned the representative from the Vordelian ascendancy. If humans possess such capacity, what prevents you from conquering the galaxy? What assurance do we have that your species won't become the very threat you claim to defend against? Dr. Riznov's expression softened. Because we remember what it means to be vulnerable. Our history is filled with conflict, yes, but also with the hard-won wisdom that cooperation achieves more than domination. We developed these technologies not to rule, but to ensure we would never be ruled, to guarantee that humanity could pursue its own destiny without fear. From the observer's gallery, Captain Darius Wright watched the proceedings with quiet intensity. Beside him sat Commander Juno Kaito, tactical specialist for the Lyra defense grid. "They're afraid of us now," Kaito whispered. "This wasn't what we wanted." "Fear can be instructive," Wright replied. "It's what you do with it that matters." Back on the chamber floor, Delegate Zinta of the Mrarshan Collective had taken the speaking position. The historical record supports the humans' claims. The Xyrillian Combine and Velkuran Syndicate both disappeared after attacking human interests. In each case, witnesses report that humans issued polite warnings before responding to aggression. That still doesn't explain why such capabilities were hidden from the Conclave, argued Vors of the Takilians. "Would you have shared such technology?" Krex rumbled unexpectedly. "Or would you have sought to acquire it by any means necessary, as my Imperium might have done?" The Noraxian's honesty drew surprised reactions from many delegates. Dr. Riznov nodded appreciatively at Krex before addressing the assembly. "We propose a new approach to interstellar relations, one based on transparency and mutual respect. Humanity will formally register our defensive capabilities with the Conclave archives, with appropriate safeguards against proliferation." He projected a new document onto the shared visual field. "We call it the Gentle Warning Doctrine. Its central tenet is simple: all species have the right to self-determination and peaceful development. Diplomatic solutions must be exhausted before any military action. Stronger powers have a responsibility to exercise restraint, not exploitation." "Pretty words," scoffed Delegate Vors. "But words don't protect colonies or trade routes." "No," agreed Riznov. "Actions do. Which is why Earth is offering to establish joint defensive grids at strategic conclave waypoints, systems that would activate only in response to unprovoked aggression against any signatory species." The chamber erupted again, this time with intense debate. The idea was revolutionary, a shared defensive framework that would effectively neutralize the advantage of superior military force throughout conclave space. This would fundamentally alter the balance of power, observed the Grand Arbiter. That's precisely the point, Riznov replied. For too long, galactic relations have been governed by the implicit threat of violence. We're proposing a system where diplomatic relations can proceed without that underlying current of coercion. High Marshal Krex shifted his massive form, drawing attention back to his projection. My ancestors would consider this weakness. After witnessing what humans are capable of, I consider it wisdom. The Noraxian Imperium supports this initiative. The endorsement from such a traditionally aggressive power sent shockwaves through the assembly. If the Noraxians, who had built their empire on military dominance, were willing to embrace this new paradigm, perhaps there was merit to the human proposal. Before further debate could ensue, emergency signals blared throughout the chamber. The Grand Arbiter's form pulsed with alarm patterns as they received incoming data. We have a situation developing in the outer rim, T-Lune announced. Long-range sensors have detected a massive energy signature approaching from intergalactic space. Initial analysis suggests a void swarm. Collective dread spread through the chamber. Void swarms were semi-sentient cosmic entities that travel between galaxies, consuming all energy in their path. The last recorded incursion, 3,000 years earlier, had resulted in the loss of 11 star systems before the swarm retreated. Projected path, inquired Riznov, his demeanor shifting to focused calculation. The swarm will reach inhabited space within 14 standard cycles, the Grand Arbiter replied. Its trajectory suggests the Noraxian core worlds will be first in its path, followed by the Tachilian systems and then the human colonies in Lyra. High Marshal Krex's bioluminescent patches pulsed with alarm patterns. Our defensive fleets are still recovering from the Lyra engagement. We cannot mount an effective defense in that timeframe. The chamber descended into anxious communications as species calculated their vulnerabilities and chances of survival. Throughout the chaos, Dr. Riznov conferred quietly with Captain Wright via secure channel, their conversation hidden from the assembly. When Riznov spoke again, his voice carried a quiet authority that somehow cut through the tumult. The United Earth Alliance will coordinate defensive operations against the Void Swarm. With what resources? Demanded Vors. Your visible fleet is minimal and your colonies are just as vulnerable as ours. We have more than ships, Riznov replied. The same technology that manipulates spacetime can be calibrated to disrupt the Void Swarm's cohesion, but we'll need cooperation from all conclave species, particularly those with territory near the swarm's projected path. Krex didn't hesitate. The Noraxian Imperium will provide whatever support is required. As will the Tachilian Dominion, added Vors, pragmatism overriding their earlier skepticism. Over the next several days, a remarkable transformation occurred throughout conclave space. Species that had competed and sometimes fought for millennia now coordinated efforts under human guidance. Noraxian warships escorted human technical teams to strategic positions. Tachilian data networks integrated with human probability models. MR-Rarshan psionics linked with human intuitive systems. Aboard the retrofitted science vessel Quantum Horizon, Captain Wright oversaw final preparations for humanity's first intentional large-scale reality manipulation. Dr. Riznov's team had modified the defensive systems used in Lyra to create a dimensional barrier that would redirect the Void Swarm away from inhabited space. Will it work? Asked Commander Kaido, studying the swarm's approach on the main display. Theoretically, Wright replied, we've never attempted anything at this scale before. Given the alternatives, theory will have to suffice, Riznov added, joining them on the bridge. The Noraxian and Tachilian vessels are in position. MR-Rarshan psionic anchors are established. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Wright nodded solemnly. Signal all ships. Initiate dimensional cascade in 3 minutes. As the countdown proceeded, Wright reflected on the irony of their situation. 1 week earlier, humans had used their most advanced technology to defend against the Noraxians. Now, those same Noraxians were essential allies in a much greater battle. 30 seconds, announced the tactical officer. Wright opened a channel to the combined fleet. Remember, once the cascade initiates, maintain your positions precisely. Any deviation could destabilize the entire field. 10 seconds. For what it's worth, Riznov said quietly, I always hoped our first major demonstration would be for creation rather than defense. 5 seconds. Next time, Wright promised. Initiating cascade. From observation points throughout nearby systems, witnesses watched as reality itself seemed to fold around the approaching void swarm. Space buckled and stretched, creating a hyperdimensional corridor that gently but inexorably redirected the cosmic entity away from inhabited space. The combined fleet held formation despite the disorienting effects of being near such fundamental manipulation. 3 hours later, telemetry confirmed success. The void swarm had been safely diverted onto a trajectory that would carry it through empty space to the galactic rim. In the aftermath, as ships returned to their respective territories, High Marshal Krex requested a private communication with Captain Wright. I understand now, the Noraxian commander admitted, his translator conveying unusual humility. When your ambassador said, please don't make us angry, it wasn't a threat issued from weakness. No, Wright agreed. It was a plea born from responsibility. Having power doesn't mean you should use it. My species has much to learn from yours, Krex observed. We have always equated restraint with weakness. And we've learned that true strength lies in knowing when not to strike, Wright replied. Perhaps there's wisdom in both perspectives. When the Galactic Conclave reconvened, the gentle warning doctrine was ratified without opposition. A new era of interstellar relations began, one founded not on military dominance but on mutual respect and the understanding that some powers were too fundamental to be wielded carelessly. Throughout inhabited space, a new saying emerged among diplomatic circles. When humans say please, listen carefully. When they stop saying please, well, hope you're not the reason why. For in the end, humanity's greatest achievement wasn't their mastery over dimensional forces or their ability to redirect cosmic entities. It was their choice to remain human, to value cooperation over conflict, and to say please when they could have simply demanded. As Dr. Riznov noted in his address to the Academy of Earth Sciences some months later, the universe is vast and filled with wonders and terrors alike. Our technology allows us to face those terrors, but it's our humanity that lets us appreciate the wonders. May we never lose sight of either. And across the galaxy, species that had once dismissed humans as upstart primitives now listened when they spoke, not out of fear, but out of respect for a civilization that had proven itself to be as wise as it was powerful. The Noraxian Empire, humbled but not broken, became one of humanity's strongest allies. High Marshal Krex, elevated to Imperial Overseer despite his defeat, often lectured at military academies about the day he learned that the most dangerous warriors weren't those with the most powerful weapons, but those with the wisdom to avoid using them. Humans are remarkable, he would tell his students, mandibles clicking with newfound respect. Not because they can bend reality, but because they choose restraint when dominance would be easier. When a human says, please listen, it's not a request, it's a gift. The gift of an alternative to discovering why they're asking nicely.